Today on CityCast Denver, History Colorado is changing. In the past few years, our state's leading historical institution has made a real effort to diversify their staff, experiment with new technology and techniques, and broaden their view on what Colorado history is worth remembering. Today, we are excited to take you inside that effort, courtesy of Dexter Nelson II, History Colorado's new Associate Curator of African American History and Cultural Heritage. He's been working on a big new project, the launch of a History Colorado app, which includes an interactive tour of the state that they're calling the Black History Trail. It's got new oral histories and new research and stories that I haven't even heard before. So today, please enjoy something a little different from us. It's a tale from History Colorado's new Black History Trail, a story teetering on the brink of being forgotten, but now will be fully recognized as part of our state's identity. It's the story of the Dry. Today is Thursday, September 22nd, 2022. I'm Bree Davies, and this is CityCast Denver. Is it ready to go?
Yes, yep.
Okay.
We're good.
Good, we'll get started. Perfect. Dexter Nelson II, welcome to CityCast Denver.
Thanks for having me today. Pleasure to be here.
How did you initially encounter this story of the Dry?
Well, when I first got here for this project of the History Colorado app, I just started doing lots of research and trying to figure out things I didn't know. And of course, Deerfield popped up pretty early on my radar. But in Deerfield's time period is about 1910 to the 1940s. So then when I heard about the Dry, I was like, well, that's really interesting. You know, how come one is so prominently, talked about and the other one isn't? And then kind of digging more into it, then I met Alice McDonald, who's currently one of the last living local residents of the Dry. She's really the gatekeeper of this story, and she's been doing an excellent job of preserving it.
So we'll just start off by talking about your names, saying and spelling your first and last name. So if you'd like to go first.
I'm Alice McDonald.
And she just really opened up her heart and her home and said, like, hey, here's my family's story. Here's what we did.
ALICE.
Here's what was done.
MCDONALD.
It's just, there's been so much time, and since the Dust Bowl, the Great Depression, there's been a few instances of vandalism to where right now the Dry, if you go there, it's not that impressive, right? It's just a lot of like flat land. Yeah. Whereas, it used to be a thriving community that, at time had, a couple hundred families there. It's not Deerfield, it's not Lincoln Hills and Gilpin County. It's the Dry. It's its own separate story that needs to be told about Black farmers in southern Colorado. It really starts with two Black women, Josephine and Lenora Rucker. They're two sisters. Some of the details are a little murky because they're lost to history, but essentially these two sisters and George W. Swink went into this business venture. George Swink, he was the first mayor of Rocky Ford. He did a lot with politics, obviously being mayor. He also did a lot in the field of irrigation. And so that was one of the, the kind of deals they made where George Swink would work to get more irrigation to this Dry area of Manzanola, which would later become the Dry. And then Josephine and Lenora went out to actually recruit people.
And so they went around the country and talked to people and visited with people and encouraged the Blacks to move to Colorado under the Homestead Act.
And they went as far as, Kansas and Oklahoma trying to get people excited to come to Colorado.
And my mother's mother was a teacher, and she was at a meeting, and they were there talking to the people. Told them about Colorado, so they decided they would come.
You have to, think about their perspective, how these were African Americans, shortly after the Civil War here in American history, and trying to find opportunity, trying to find advancement, right? Trying to get their piece of the American dream. And that's where we see this opportunity to have land, right? Because we know you have to have land, land equals power, right? And so you have, this almost second migration of African Americans following the Rucker sisters to come to Colorado in hopes of homesteading, having their own land, improving it, and then having that be their own.
And so they went along in their wagon pulled by their horses until they went over a rise, and they stopped and looked. And my mother said you could see for 100 miles nothing but flat prairie, no trees, cactus. And as they looked around, not even any wildlife. They didn't see a rabbit or a bird. I remember Mother saying when they arrived here at Manzanowlawide, her father saw a man at the Highline Ditch, and he was dipping water and putting it into barrels on his wagon. And so he asked him how to get to the dry. And the man looked at him and he said, mister, he said, you don't want to come here. You don't want to stay here.
I don't think it was as lush as they thought it was going to be. Again, that's the name. It's very dry, flat land.
And she said she actually cried because it just was not what she had thought they would find at all.
But to me, that really speaks to the tenacity of these farmers, because instead of just looking at the land and saying, oh, it's dry, we were lied to, and then leaving, right? They stuck it out. They said, well, let's still try to farm here, right? Let's do dry land farming. Let's raise cattle.
And I think that was probably the feeling that so many of the homesteaders had, but they were here and they decided, well, we'll make the best of it.
Remind me again, who is Alice?
Yeah, so Alice, she is the daughter of Roland and Harvey Craig Sr. And yeah, she grew up in the dry. This is what we love to see in the museum field, right? Like a primary source, not someone who's saying, oh, I heard this story and this, but she lived it. And so in one oral history is actually the one that I conducted with Alice. She talks about having to go and fetch water for the cows, or for everything you need water for, whereas her children, they have memories of going there and playing or making fly swatters and whimsical kid things, where she's like, no, like I was hauling buckets of water. And so it's just like
she was surviving. Yeah,
exactly. So it's just a very different experience, and the fact that it's so well hidden, even though a few different organizations have done efforts to try to retell this story, but it's like at the end of the day, we say, hey, go talk to Alice because it's Alice's story. It's great.
I want to ask about racism in the dry.
There was Ku Klux Klan in this area, and of course Colorado has always been full of the Klan members. Mm-hmm. They had a Klan group here. One night my father had gone into town and was coming home, and his little old car broke down. And so he knew all of the farmers in the valley, so he thought, well, I'll stop and I'll walk over here and see if someone will help me. Well, when he got to a couple of houses, there was no one at home. So he said, well, I'll just leave it there and I'll walk home, and I'll come back in the morning and get the car. So he started walking home, and as he walked, he could see a glow in the sky, and he thought that's odd, and it wasn't the moon, but he kept on walking, and when he reached a distance there, he saw a group of men on horseback and in their robes and their hoods. And so one of the fellows rode up to him and he said, Harv, is that you? And Dad said, yeah. And he said, what's the matter? And he said, oh, my car broke down. And he said, I went to a couple of you fellows' houses. There was nobody at home. And he said, oh, we're out here having a little meeting. Where's your car? And he said, it's down by so-and-so's house. And he said, well, I can't help you right now because we're having this meeting. But he said, go ahead on home. And he said, don't just stay, and tomorrow I'll come and pick you up and bring you down, and we'll fix your car and get you going again. So it was a good relationship. They were all working and trying to survive. and racism was not a problem at all.
And again, that just speaks to, I think, to the hardships of just the times back then of a farming community, because they needed each other. You know, it wasn't so much black or white. It was who can help us reach this goal. And so that's just, again, another, optimistic picture that we want to highlight too, as part of this whole narrative. So already, right, it's flipping two things on its head. It's flipping the idea that African Americans weren't in Colorado or haven't done significant things in Colorado. And second, we have a story of Klansmen helping a black farmer in the early 1900s. So things like that's just really, it's a really unique story.
Are you still quoting 30-year-old movies? Have you said cool beans in the past 90 days? Do you think Discover isn't widely accepted? If this sounds like you're stuck in the past. Discover is accepted at 99% of places that take credit cards nationwide. And every time you make a purchase with your card, you automatically earn cash back. Welcome to the now. It pays to Discover. Learn more at discover.com/credit card, based on the February 2024 Nielsen report.
And this gentleman that they worked with, Swink, he's a white guy, right?
Yes, he is a white man. And so it's interesting. There's some stories about there was some irrigation in the dry at one point in time, enough so that people could do more normalized farming, but then dried up, the Dust Bowl. So, obviously there's a lack of communication there, and no irrigation was ever put in. So it seems like that part of the deal never came to fruition.
So after the people came and they settled, why they worked along with Swink, and they put in an irrigation system on their Pishopaw at the headwaters. And with their horses and their teams and their shovels and by hand, they put in canals and built a dam. And that was probably in 1923 that they finished this dam.
And there's some stories of some irrigation. Like, I won't say that it never had water, right? There's been some oral histories of people watching the wheat field being flooded and being irrigated, but also dams breaking and then them not being repaired, just drought in general, just lack of rain, things like that made it really difficult. So the fact that some of these families were there for 10, 20, 30 years even is really quite remarkable. It's a great example of just Black excellence, where they saw the challenge and then they decided to step up to that challenge.
That was the shortcoming of homesteading out there. There wasn't enough water. They did have an irrigation system. Old man Swink from Rocky Ford, he built 5 lakes out on that area, and was going to run the water from the Pishopaw River west there, going toward Waltonburg, run water down across that prairie. They had a big dam up there on the Pishopaw River, and I've actually seen the water run in the ditches down across the prairie. But that wasn't enough. Nobody wasn't able to make a living at that. So that went under, and the people moved away to get jobs to make a living.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't exist anymore. It was around the 1930s, 1940s. People just had enough with lack of irrigation, the drought, the Great Depression, the Dust Bowl. Times were very, very hard there. And again, because of the environment, there weren't a whole lot of houses built out of lumber. It's more of the dugouts. I think because there's just a lack of resources, that's why there aren't any permanent structures there, as opposed to Deerfield, where we have 2-3 buildings that are intact. You can tell what they used to be, whereas the dry, nothing survived.
So what would you say to someone who looks out at that barren, empty land in southeast Colorado and calls the Dry a failure?
Yeah, it's a great question. I guess it means, what makes something a failure or not. People came here, they tried to make the land better, right? They tried to improve it, but just because of extenuating factors outside of their control, they weren't able to do that. So I think calling it a failure is a little too harsh. But at the same time, and we see this as evident in Alice, that the Dry produced intelligent, resilient, smart individuals. And so in that sense, it's definitely not a failure because it's still relevant to talk about and it's still relevant to show the ingenuity of these individuals.
I love that, Dexter, because I grew up here. I didn't know about Deerfield till I was older. But I have a 1-year-old son who's going to learn Colorado history, and his experience will always include, the Dry will always be part of that. Like he will never not know the story of homesteading in Colorado in particular that includes all of these different kinds of stories. And I just wonder, what does a story like the Dry mean to you as someone that studies this?
Yeah, I mean, it means everything, because too often because of white supremacy, the stories of the Black experience have either just been completely discredited or erased. And so even out here, we talk about early Black pioneers and fur trappers, and people are like, what? You guys were out here then? And it's yeah, right. we've been here for a long time, and we've been doing really big, important things, such as the farming community of Deerfield, of the Dry, where we've actually been, working the land and doing things, so it's important to really to carry that and to keep reminding people that we were out here farming too. It's not a new thing that Black people are in Colorado, and so that's been really important to just show the full spectrum of the Black experience here in the West.
I think that's so important too, because we have this longtime narrative of this picture of the West. And so often it excludes Black folks, homesteaders, cowboys, like you said, fur trappers. You know what I mean? Black folks were part of this story all along. And it's for so long been sort of cut out of the picture. But now we get to put that picture back in and say, this is the full picture. This is, you know what I mean? This is the West. I mean, I know, I don't know if folks can tell from your accent, but you're not from Colorado, but you're from Oklahoma, which is
right.
Has a similar story, I think, when folks think about Oklahoma. And it's just really cool that you get to create a new version of history that's more reflective of what actually happened.
Well, no, thank you all so much for your time for this. This has been great. I mean, I feel like everyone in this room really understands and values the importance of preserving and promoting just our history. So I just thank you all for your time and for coming up here. Yeah.
Well, we're pleased that you're interested and concerned and doing some valuable work. So,
yeah, no, this is definitely one of the stories that one of the ones I want to shout from the rooftop is just trying to find the best way to do that is to make sure that it's lasting, it's intentional.
Well, Dexter Nelson II, thank you so much for sharing this story.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Find more amazing stories and history and people like Alice McDonald on the Black History Trail in the new History Colorado app. It's out now, and you can download it wherever you get your mobile apps. And here's what else Denverites are talking about. 2 days after East High School and other schools across the state shut down in response to hoax phone calls about active shooters, Denver Public Library shut down all branches across the city yesterday. They reported receiving an unspecified threat on Tuesday night. Denver Post reports that the FBI was aware of the string of hoax active shooter calls earlier in the week. It's unclear if the DPL calls were part of the same incident, so we're going to keep an eye on this as it develops. And finally, pizza. Denver's never really had a great reputation when it comes to pizza. Just check out the Yelp reviews of like any pizza joint in town. There's inevitably that one transplant who claims they can't find good pizza anywhere. Well, CityCast Denver is on the case, and we need your help. We're finally, definitively, and conclusively taking on the question of Denver pizza. So we need all your hottest pizza takes. Where's Denver's best pizza? Is there a Denver-style pizza? What's the most overrated pizza place in town? Leave us a voicemail with your name and neighborhood, and you might hear your pizza take on the show next week. Our number is 720-500-5418. That's all for today here on CityCast Denver. We use some additional music in this episode from Jason Shaw, thanks to Creative Commons license. You also heard clips from 2 oral histories from the History Colorado collection. The new one, Dexter made with Alice McDonald, but also a clip from one made decades ago with Alice's mother, Roland Craig. If you enjoyed the show, why not take a minute to tell George Swink's grandkids about us? Rate the show wherever you get your podcasts and subscribe to our morning newsletter. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. See ya! It's when you feel like a robot. You're like, oh, sorry, I malfunctioned. Excuse me, I just made up 2 words.